Well, let's just jump to the first story, and we'll talk about John Kerry reveals Biden's devotion to radical Great Reset movement from The Hill. This to me is really funny because they say the Great Reset's a conspiracy theory, but it's actually what they've been calling it for some time. The Hill says, in June, elites at important international institutions such as the World Economic Forum and the United Nations launched a far-reaching campaign to reset the global economy. The plan involves dramatically increasing the power of government through expansive new social programs like the Green New Deal and using vast regulatory schemes and government programs to coerce corporations into supporting left-wing causes. Obviously, this is, I think it's a biased view of what they're saying, but to be fair, the World Economic Forum has pushed a lot of left-wing causes as they've referenced the Great Reset. It goes on to say, the two justifications for the proposal, which has been aptly named by its supporters the Great Reset, are the COVID-19 pandemic, the short-term justification, and the so-called climate crisis caused by global warming, the long-term justification. According to the Great Reset's supporters, the plan would fundamentally transform much of society, as World Economic Forum head Klaus Schwab wrote back in June, quote, "The world must act jointly and swiftly to revamp all aspects of our societies and economies. From education to social contracts and working conditions, every country from the United States to China must participate, and every industry from oil and gas to tech must be transformed. In short, we need a great reset of capitalism." They go on to say, internationally, the Great Reset has already been backed by influential leaders, activists, academics, and institutions, in addition to the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. The Great Reset movement counts among its there's a missing word there, I suppose. The International Monetary Fund, heads of state, Greenpeace, and CEOs and presidents of large corporations and financial institutions such as Microsoft and MasterCard. But in America, most policymakers, including President-elect Joe Biden, have been relatively quiet about the Great Reset, leaving many to speculate what a Biden administration would do to support or oppose this radical plan. They go on to say that at a panel discussion about the Great Reset hosted by the World Economic Forum in mid-November, former Secretary of State John Kerry, Biden's would-be special presidential envoy for climate, firmly declared that the Biden administration will support the Great Reset and that the Great Reset, quote, will happen with greater speed and with greater intensity than a lot of people might imagine. When asked by panel host Borge Brend whether the World Economic Forum and other Great Reset supporters are expecting too much too soon from the new president, or is he going to deliver the first day on these topics, Kerry responded, "The answer to your question is no, you're not expecting too much. And yes, the Great Reset will happen. And I think it will happen with greater speed and with greater intensity than a lot of people might imagine. In effect, the citizens of the United States have just done a Great Reset. We've done a Great Reset, and it was a record level of voting." Kerry later argued that the Great Reset is necessary to slow the climate crisis and that, quote, "I know Joe Biden believes it's not enough to just rejoin the Paris Climate Accords for the United States. It's not enough for us to just do the minimum of what Paris requires." So I'm not going to read literally the last bit of this. It's clearly an opinion piece, but it's talking about something that's actually happening. Lockdowns. I'm going to ask you, Destiny, your opinion, because you were mentioning before that you're for them.
Well, are we going to talk about the Great Reset or are we going to talk about lockdowns?
Well, we're talking about the Great Reset for sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless you want to respond to that first.
Oh, that all sounded really cool, I guess. The idea that we have an opportunity to reorganize things based around like some kind of like ongoing crisis that might expose, weak parts of our economy or weak parts of, healthcare infrastructure, or whatever. Like, I think the idea of capitalizing on those types of disasters and moving new programs forward, I think is really good. I think it's like pretty standard business practice too, right? Like nobody files bankruptcy and comes back the exact same way, right? Usually it's an opportunity to restructure your business, to get rid of stuff that doesn't work, to improve on stuff that does work. Like, I don't see the horrible part about that. But more specifically, lockdowns or?
Yeah, so I guess the general idea is that when they're talking about lockdowns, they're not talking about COVID. They're talking about the Great Reset and climate change. And that's the gist of what I get from John Kerry's statements. Initially, they said the Great Reset, of global capitalism, whatever, would be due to COVID. It's a great opportunity to do it. But then clearly what their real concern is climate change.
Just because you take an opportunity to, so I think it was Chicago, was one of the cities that had like massive fires that like ravaged the city, and they used the opportunity to rebuild a lot of the city's infrastructure. I don't think people were ever claiming they set the fires just to rebuild the city. I don't think anybody would claim that we want to lock down the country just to further climate change. There might be a way to make that
stop
argument,
climate change,
or to further climate change agenda, anti-climate change agenda. Yeah, that might be an argument that one could make in another world where we aren't topping ourselves every single day with record numbers of infections and deaths. Like if we were Australia or New Zealand and we were doing lockdowns continually, then maybe like, oh, hold on, there's an agenda here. But I mean, like we're losing Twin Towers worth of people every day. The idea that this is just a conspiracy to pass climate change agenda stuff seems like a hard sell to me.
I don't think it's a conspiracy. I think it's that they're exploiting a crisis.
But that's good. Shouldn't we do that?
Not necessarily.
Isn't a crisis like one of your best opportunities to like restructure? Like I give with the example of like a failing business. Like if something really horrible happens, generally horrible things happen because they expose some type of flaw or defect in what you do. Like isn't that the time for change? Especially because that's when you're going to get the most like activism behind it.
Don't people have rights though? Like, don't you have a right to make choices for yourself, live your life?
Sometimes,
especially with the Constitution.
Kind of. That's a very vague sense. I mean, like, do I have the right to go out and get drunk and drive?
You don't.
Okay, so we have some rights, right? Insofar as we're not infringing on the rights of others. So whether that's crashing in a drunk driving accident or infecting somebody with SARS-CoV-2, right? It's probably depends on what right we're talking about, I would imagine.
Yeah, so if you don't want to get sick, then shouldn't you stay home?
If you don't want a drunk driver to hit you, should you just never drive?
Well, that's different. That's someone who might be sick and doesn't know and is living their life under emergency circumstances like, I have to make money and feed my family. There's no circumstance where you have to be drunk and drive to feed your family.
There's no circumstance where you have to be outside and standing right next to people without a mask or whatever.
Well,
right?
we're not talking about that. We're talking, well, I mean, if you want to criticize the Black Lives Matter protests and, the Biden's, the big Biden rallies or whatever they just did when Biden won, then yeah, there's no reason for those people to be doing that stuff.
You can simultaneously criticize them and the anti-lockdown people too as well, right? That's not like I can criticize both. To my knowledge, a lot of the people were in those protests were wearing masks, though. I mean, from what I saw.
Well, in the Biden one, they were taking their masks off and drinking and sharing drinks was like one of the big videos that came around.
Sure, that's pretty dumb. That's pretty dumb for sure.
For sure.
But I'm just more fundamentally, I'm just saying that like to come up with the like, don't we have rights? Well, yeah, I mean, of course we do. But I mean, we learned this growing up. With more rights also comes more responsibility. Like
I think the drunk driving thing doesn't work. There's a guy in Staten Island who got arrested trying to run his bar. He has to. Otherwise, he becomes homeless and he can't feed his family. And then what? Did they beg the government for help? The government's not giving it to him. And you can blame Mitch McConnell or Nancy Pelosi.
No, we could blame Mitch McConnell. Pelosi sent him like trillions of dollars of bills that are dying on his desk.
But we still had Democrats saying it was Pelosi's fault. You had Wolf Blitzer criticizing Pelosi. So I think it's fair to point the finger at both.
We're pointing a very short dwarven finger at one, and we're pointing like the nose of Pinocchio at the other. In terms of people fighting over specifically, what is Pelosi pushing for? What is she not pushing for? There can be back and forth over that. The fact of the matter is, there was some like $2.5 trillion bill that was left in McConnell's desk when he moonwalked out of the Senate after they confirmed ACB. So I mean, the blame is not even remotely close to equal there. The House passed legislation, the Senate let it die.
That's true.
You can't both sides that one. I don't think. But
I think that's. Whether or not it's me trying to do it, this is what people are doing, right?
Well, so Wolf Blitzer might have specifically criticized, like, hey, Pelosi, maybe
he cited
Ro
Khanna.
What?
He cited Ro Khanna. He was citing Democrats who were calling out Pelosi, and Pelosi didn't want to answer the question. So, if obviously if you're on the right, the right's going to say, see, the issue with the HEROES Act was that they wanted fun, they were stuffing things in it that didn't make sense, and the Republicans did the same thing. They wanted money for an FBI building. I don't want to go off on the Democrat versus Republican.
Sure. Well, it's important because obviously as a huge diehard Biden fan, I'm going to fight viciously back against the idea that both sides messed up. The fact of the matter is that if I go into the Senate, they did not give us legislation for any type of coronavirus release, and Pelosi did. She delivered. We have that legislation. It's sitting on the floor of the Senate, and it's never going to be called for a vote. But,
so I want to keep it to the discussion of the lockdown rights, the Great Reset stuff.
Yeah.
So the government is clearly not providing for people, regardless of whose fault it is. You can say it's Republicans' fault, then absolutely.
Sure.
What is a working class, man or woman to do when they're told, specifically in Staten Island, the issue was that this bar wasn't allowed to serve people, but 2 blocks away, everything was normal. They said this specific zone has been locked down. So when the guy said, I have nothing left to lose, the money that did go out overwhelmingly went to massive corporations. The lockdown is overwhelmingly benefiting.
The money should go to massive corporations, right?
No.
Why not?
It should go to the people who can then buy resources to go to the businesses to make sure they can cover their costs and their taxes.
Okay, so the PPP loans, I wish I could remember what every word stands for, but the PPP loans were loans given to corporations that allow them to cover up to 2.5 months of employment expenses when they paid employees. If they did that, then the loan was going to be forgiven. We still haven't gotten the paperwork for what that forgiveness looks like, but that's the point. So if I have one corporation that hires 10,000 people and another company that hires 10 people, well, of course more money is going to go to the corporation because there's more payroll to cover, right? But it's not. But the corporations aren't.
It's a semantic issue.
Well, no, it's not semantic. No, it's very important. Yeah.
What I meant was not that a small business with 10 employees was getting money. What I meant was when the lockdown happens, the money ends up in the hands of the ultra wealthy. The stores that are allowed to remain open tend to be the big box stores. And that's why we saw the massive profits, the massive spiking in stock value for these big companies, notably Amazon. The working class people got $1,200.
Yeah, stock values are definitely a thing. But if you, I'm just talking very specifically because it's very important to understand each of these policies. So the PPP only works for you if you pay out employees. So I got a PPP loan. The way that works, the way that the paperwork details is that when I get that money, I can claim up to 2.5 times the expenses of all of my employees. And the only money that's forgiven for me is what I pay out to my employees. So for me personally, there were like 2 people that I kept on payroll just because, the government's going to pay for it. Yeah, screw it. I'll take the PPP money and then I'll continue to pay them out because it'll be forgiven. I only kept those 2 people on payroll because the government gave me that PPP money. And any corporation isn't going to pocket the money. It gets paid out to employees. It has to be.
Did they give you money to pay your rent, pay your taxes, pay your costs, replace perishable goods?
No, it's just to cover the cost of employing the employees. So not to cover everything, yeah.
What happens with the lockdown is massive businesses, the likes of McDonald's, Starbucks, they can shut down and they can roll their eyes.
And they can absorb. 100% I agree.
Small businesses are being destroyed. So that's the question I said, don't people have rights? When these people, we see now, there's a West Michigan story going viral where a guy, there's a news report going on, a guy walks out of his restaurant and he yells to the news reporter, he's like, is this you? Are you talking about me? And he said, they've taken everything. The money is going to their friends. It's going to special interests. The bailout that came out, people did get a stimulus, and then money did go to small businesses. But if the small businesses are shut down and can't sell things, what happens? The restaurant, their perishable goods, gone. They can't reopen. So in New Jersey, 1/3 of small businesses have been destroyed.
Sure. And I've heard similar in New York restaurants and everything. Like a lot of places that are closing are never coming back probably. It's a tragedy, of course. Yeah.
So I guess to keep it in context of the Great Reset, talking about exploiting a crisis to make some change is also destroying the lives of people, resulting in spikes in suicide, spikes in crime.
I don't think we're locking down, though, for the Great Reset. I think we're locking down because record numbers of people are getting infected and dying from the coronavirus. If we can do something on the backs of that, I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. Maybe part of that Great Reset, and I'm almost positive without knowing the intricacies, I'm pretty sure that part of that Great Reset is probably going to be like more stimulus for small business owners. It's going to be covering healthcare for people. It's going to be more types of like checks or disbursements during like times of crisis. That's probably going to be baked into that Great Reset as well. Because as you accurately pointed out, the relief that we got so far, even the PPP loans were a joke. And what is it, like one $1,200 check, I think, went out to every American? That's like, it would have almost been better to send nothing because that $1,200 is like a slap on the face. Like, what's wrong?
Do you know that 23.6% of all U.S. dollars ever created was created this year?
I was not aware of that.
That's crazy, right?
Doesn't sound too crazy. It sounds like probably the Fed is doing what it can to. The Fed's primary job is to reduce inflation and to curb unemployment. Which is funny because Trump always takes credit for low black unemployment, even though that's squarely in the job of the Federal Reserve, which has no oversight from the president. But the Federal Reserve probably sees that we are spiking unemployment as long as we're not raising in inflation, which we haven't been. Their goal would probably be some form of QE, quantitative easing, or super low interest rates or whatever. So yeah, that makes sense.
I think, first of all, I'd say I agree with you on a lot of these things. And also, if your perspective is the lockdowns are strictly because of we have this pandemic, that's an opinion, I guess. You know, you'll argue that you're correct. I think when you look at certain jurisdictions and you look at the World Health Organization saying it's a very, very last resort, it should be avoided, and it can be, and they do it anyway, it sounds to me like, well, they've said it. They want to exploit COVID-19. It's their opportunity to enact this policy. And they didn't say it was because of COVID-19. They said it was because of climate change. So should I disregard the World Health Organization's warning about lockdowns?
So I think I don't know among major countries, because I know there are some smaller ones, but among every country, we're 11th right now in per capita death, and we lead the world in absolute death. I don't know what last resort sounds like to you, but that sounds like we're pretty close to like last resort there.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.